have one of those designer, self-worth, with the label that you like to strut around, like, I'm terrific, I can do anything, I'm lovable. Whatever it is, your self-esteem is basically how you feel, and from the moment you stick your hand out to shake someone's hand and say hello, it shows up. It shows up in every relationship you have. It's so fundamental to who you are that it affects every decision you make in your life. From, what do I have to offer the world? In other words, what am I worthy to give? Down to the littlest things like, what do I want for dinner tonight? I want sushi. Oh, I've already had sushi twice this week. I don't know if I can afford. Oh, I don't know. Every decision you make, how you feel about yourself comes into play. So the first thing we want to say about self-worth is that it's a completely man-made concept. Okay, I'm sure you know from Terry there's no duality in the mind of God. So there can't be an idea that this person's worthy and this one isn't, or that one person can do something to make them unworthy. So the first thing I want you to know is that you're never judged by God. Your self-worth is the judgments you've made upon yourself based on your past actions. And this is another reason why we know that God is not judging you. Because another aspect, another trait that we give to God is that God only exists in the now moment. Right? There's that song, There Is No Spot Where God Is Not. I think it's Karen Taylor Good. And I said, but Karen, there's two spots, the past and the future. God only exists right in the present moment. And since your self-worth is based on judgments you've made on actions you've done in the past, then there can be no judgment about you in this moment. So the first thing you want to know, you're not being judged by God, and your self-worth is completely up to you. And that's the first step. You have to be ready to release past judgments about yourself. So let's say that together. I am ready to release all past judgments about myself. Together, I am ready to release all past judgments of myself. So if your self-image is really a choice that you make, and I believe Jesus knew that, and that his healing miracles were really based on the idea of self-worth and making and choosing. When he told the blind man, your faith has made you whole, I think he was really telling him, you have seen yourself as whole. His faith in Jesus was so strong that he was able to see himself healed. Okay? And that vision of himself healed is what brought forth God's healing power through him to heal him. So rather than saying that Jesus healed people, I always like to say Jesus really inspired healing in other people through the faith that he inspired in them. When he told the man at the pool of Bethesda, do you want to be healed? He was really asking him, do you really see yourself as worthy? Or do you think you are worthy to be healed? Because the man had made it to the pool for 38 years. He must have lived somewhere, and he was able to get from wherever he lived down to the pool. But for some reason, that last 2 feet, he could never make it. And I think the 38 years is probably symbolic of that too, because 40 is the number of completion. And the story says 38 years. So it's kind of telling us that he was just short of always getting his healing. And it made me think of times when I was when I would put out a big goal and have something I'd want to do, and I would get almost there, and then something would stop me. Either some feelings of unworthiness, or I'd manifest some illness or some excuse, and I would always stop just a little bit before getting there. Never quite, always stuck on the side of that pool. So our self-worth has to do with how we heal ourselves and how we show up in the world. He knew it was not a matter of whether God wanted you to be healed. Of course God wants you to be healed. And Jesus knew it wasn't a matter of whether God saw you as whole. God created you as whole. So God would always see you as whole. In fact, Jesus says in Luke, it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Isn't that a great verse? For it is the Father's good pleasure. Now I unitized it a little bit and wrote it on a Post-it note, put it on my morning mirror, and I saw every day that I woke up, I went in and saw, it is God's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. Let's say that together. It is God's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. What could possibly stop God from giving you what God wants to give you? Right? Only your own choice, only your own decisions about who you are and your self-worth. So I actually unitized it a little farther now. as we're getting more and evolving into our languaging, and I've dwindled that meaning down to this: the universe conspires to ensure my happiness. Can you say that? The universe conspires to ensure my happiness. That's a beautiful statement. So the mind and the energy that is God is always seeking to bless you. The energy and the mind that is God always sees you as whole and worthy. And I saw this great demonstration once, and I'm going to do it for you. I certainly didn't make this up. And I'm going to put this in the offering plate. He pulled out a $100 bill and said, "Who wants this $100 bill?" And of course, everybody's hand went up. I don't have a $100 bill, but I have a $20 bill, and I'm going to ask you who wants it. Don't be shy. Now, if I said I was going to give it to you, you'd all probably raising your hand, right? But what if I crumbled it up? Would you still want it? Yeah, or even if I threw it on the ground and stepped on it and crumbled it up, you'd still want it, right? And what is the reason you'd still want it? It's still worth $20. No matter how much I crumble it up, no matter how dirty it gets, it never loses its value. And I thought that was such a great demonstration example of how God sees us. No matter how crumpled up or dirty or wrinkled up you think you are, no matter how sinful you think you've been, God never sees you as less than whole and less than worthy. And I think this example is beautifully illustrated too in the story of the prodigal son, which showed up in that song we sang. We remember the story. It's in Luke, and the younger son comes and asks his father for his inheritance. Now, this is an unusual request because usually you get an inheritance after your father dies, and the father was still alive, and also he was the younger brother, not the younger son, not the older son. But it also says nothing in there about the father saying, "Well, what have you done to deserve this? Why should I give you your inheritance early? What have you done?" Nothing. He gladly handed him his inheritance. And we know the rest of the story. The son goes out and he squanders it, and he comes back. And he says, "Father, I am not worthy to be called your son. I have sinned against heaven and before you." And that reminded me of the times when I've done things. Even if it was stealing $5 from my mom's purse when I was a teenager. That always made me feel like I've fallen out of grace with God, looking over my shoulder. Oh, God's going to get me for that one. And he came home just, feeling so unworthy that he had fallen out of grace with his father. But what did the father do? Celebrated. Not just celebrated, but in a big way. He gave him the ring, the robe, the fatted calf, everything. Then celebrated in a huge way. He basically never saw his son as unworthy. Not when he asked for his inheritance, and not when he came back feeling unworthy and had squandered it. He never fell out of grace with his father. And that's the way, by the same token, you're never seen as unworthy by God. There's no one else judging you. The guilt you feel that has made you feel unworthy all this time is really of your own making. It's like, I picture like this, carrying around this big bag of bricks with me everywhere I go. And then someone saying, "Well, why don't you just set it down? I'm so tired of this bricks." Well, just set it down. And that's what guilt and unworthiness is. It's like a big bag of bricks you're lugging around that's keeping you good from you, slowing you down. All you need to do is set it down. Now, the older brother in this story, he also had his issues with self-worth. He was ticked off. He said, "I've worked for you all my life. I've been faithful to you. You've never given me so much as a calf to celebrate with my friends." Well, do you think that the father who gave his youngest son all his inheritance and then welcomed him with open arms when he'd squandered it would have hesitated to give his oldest son a calf or a goat to celebrate with? Of course not. But what was the difference between the two brothers? Remember the song? All he had to do was ask. He never asked. The younger son felt worthy. He felt worthy enough to go to his father and say, "I want my inheritance now. I deserve this. I would like it now. You're my father. It's my inheritance." But the older son did not even feel worthy enough to ask for a goat to celebrate. Now, in Unity and New Thought, we have what we call affirmative prayer, right? Well, we don't really ask the Father for what we want. It's because the very nature of asking brings into play your self-worth. Because when you ask God for something, You have to either wait for God to answer, or you have to feel, am I worthy? Is God going to answer? Have I been good enough to have my prayers answered? So see, the very nature of the idea of asking God to bless you brings into play your self-worth. And I think it's rooted in our traditional religions, where we feel unworthy. You know, as an ex-Catholic, I'm really not an ex-Catholic. I guess you're born into it and you stay there. But as a Catholic, we're always told we're not worthy, and we have to ask God. And if God sees you as worthy, He would bless you. So in affirmative prayer, we don't ask. We affirm from ourselves, from what we want, through the power of our intention and our focused thoughts. And the interesting thing is that this is really not new thought. If you go to the oldest language on the planet, Sanskrit, and you look at the word for prayer, the word for prayer is pal-al. It's P-A-L-A-L. Pal-al. And it means seeing yourself as wondrously made, or judging oneself as wondrously made. That's the definition of prayer. Now, it took me a while to wrap my mind around that, but I realized the youngest son had to see himself as wondrously made, judge himself worthy to ask, to pray, to go to the Father and manifest what he wanted. We have to judge ourselves as wondrously made. That's the true meaning of affirmative prayer in this ancient language from thousands of years ago. And the message there still is that if you feel unworthy, you can't go to the altar of God and manifest the things you want with your unworthiness in hand. And that brings us to our second step. You must be willing to see yourself as wondrously made. Are you? Let's say, I am willing to see myself as wondrously made. Together? I am willing to see myself as wondrously made. I love that, because sometimes it's hard to say if you're carrying around a lot of guilt and unworthiness. But there's still a missing key. I felt like I was doing all of the things correctly. I had my little affirmations up, and I was saying them. I was being good, and I felt my karma was in line, but still not manifesting the things I wanted to. I wasn't drawing them into my life. And it wasn't until I taught on my way to becoming a licensed Unity teacher at Unity Village, and I took a class. I had to teach Eric Butterworth's Spiritual Economics, a wonderful book about manifesting prosperity in your life. And I didn't expect to find the missing key to my self-worth there. But somewhere around page 90 or 92, he said, you do not draw to you what you want. You do not draw to you what you pray for. Not even what you say you have faith in. You will always draw to you what you actually expect. And that's when I got it. Spouting off denials and affirmations, like Harry Potter, and incantations and waving a wand and just expecting something to show up wasn't working. I can affirm I'm a holy child of God and heir to God's kingdom all day long. But if I didn't actually expect it to come, it wasn't going to show up. And I was not always expecting it. You know why? Because you only expect what you think you deserve. You can ask for the world, but you're only going to expect what you think you deserve. If you peel away a few layers and get down underneath it, you can say, well, I was asking, asking to win the lottery. Did I think I deserved it? Were you really expecting it? We only expect what we think we deserve. Have you ever gone into a situation where you were thinking something was going to happen, it was going to be great, and then it turned out to be not so great, and you found yourself saying, I knew it. I knew it. What you're really saying is, I expected that. Or have you been in a relationship where you say, this is just too good to be true. Oh, this is too good to be true. What you're really saying is, I don't deserve this, and I expect that it's not going to last very long. So if you peel away where your real intentions are around the things you're asking for, you might find that what you're thinking, what you're putting out to the universe, the vibration that you're sending out is not a vibration of expectation. It's a vibration of, if I'm good, this might come, which is what I was doing all along. And once I started expecting, things, I could just feel the expectation. I know this is happening. Jesus said, ask knowing you will receive, and you will receive. So if you change it to ask expecting to receive, and you will receive, that gave it a whole new oomph to me. Up the octane a little bit on the asking and the affirming. I think it was Don Jennings, who's passed on now, who said that Jesus never said anything that he didn't demonstrate. So I went into the Bible and I started looking. We're taught in Unity that we're the same as Jesus. We have the same consciousness. We have the same Christ center. And Jesus even said, you have what I have. You can do these things. So what is it that's different? Why am I not manifesting the way Jesus is? Why am I not creating healing the way Jesus is? So I went into the Bible and I looked around, and the game, not the game, but the phrase, the WWJD. You ever seen that on license plates? What would Jesus do? When someone cuts you off before you shoot them a sign or say something nasty, you say, oh, what would Jesus do in this situation? Well, I thought I would create a game called WWRD. What would Richard do? And I think this is a very valuable game to play for anyone who's reading the Bible, especially the New Testament. And I put myself in Jesus' place in all of these, in 3 or 4 of the situations. And I thought, well, what would Richard do in this? I'm reading here what Jesus did. What would Richard do? And I start at the tomb of Lazarus. And I'm thinking, how many of us could stand outside of a tomb of a guy who's been dead for 3 days and say, Lazarus, come forth, and actually expect him to come out? I know I wouldn't. I'd be acting real big and go, Lazarus, come forth, and go, God, I hope this works. I would be just as surprised as anybody. If Lazarus, I go, wow, it worked. Jesus didn't have to do that. He even prayed the prayer before he called him forth. That I'm just praying for show. I know your glory is going to be manifested in this. I don't have to worry about it. At the Sermon on the Mount, where he's dishing out the loaves and fishes, to pass these out, I would have said, we'll start with the disciples first in case this doesn't work. There may not be enough to go around. We're going to hand this out. It became really clear to me at Jesus' very first miracle at the wedding of Cana. I put myself in Jesus' place. And you remember, they ran out of wine and asked Jesus to replace the wine. So he told the servants to fill up the empty flasks with water. And then he asked them to fill a glass up from the flask. Great. And then he said, now take it to the host right there. I said, I wouldn't have done that. I would have said, bring me the water. I want to make sure it's turned to wine before I send it to the host. I don't want to send him a glass of water. He'd think I'm an idiot. Jesus didn't have to do that. He knew. He asked knowing. So can we ask knowing the way Jesus did? Ask expecting the way Jesus did for the things in our life? If we can't, then why not? And am I saying that the only difference between us and Jesus is the way we feel about ourselves? Our self-worth, our self-esteem, how we see ourselves? What else could it be? Physically, we're not any different. Evolutionarily, we're actually probably farther along. So what else could it be except the way we feel about ourselves, what we expect, how we see ourselves in relationship to God? So how do we get to that point where Jesus was? We know it's possible, so how do we emulate that example? It's the third step. You must see yourself as worthy to ask, knowing you will receive. In other words, expecting to receive. See yourself as worthy, expecting to receive. The statement is, I am worthy and I expect the best. Together? I am worthy and I expect the best. I expect the best. Great. It's great. So there are the 3 steps. Ready to let go of the past judgments. Willing to see yourself as wondrously made. And seeing yourself as worthy and expecting the best in your life. So is your self-worth really a choice? Yeah, who else is there? Who else is there judging you? And who are you holding? Who's holding you up to someone else as a basis for comparison to be judged? Who else could possibly determine your self-worth? Now maybe you came from a family or a spouse or a religion, or you have friends that are doomsayers. I want to be a basketball player. Oh, you're too short. I want to be a writer. Well, you've never written anything. But those people What they feel about you has nothing to do with what you draw to your life. Okay? You can say, thank you for sharing. Goodbye. And only what you think about yourself. Only what you think about yourself determines what you draw. Their faith in you has nothing to do with the good that comes into your life. So the way you feel about yourself, your self-worth, is the basis for the manifestation process in your life. If you really feel like you're doing you're doing everything right, and you would like to do more, or you're saying, well, why isn't this happening? Why is this such a struggle? Look deep and find out if there are any old opinions, any old statements of yourself that you may have been given. I was always told I was shy when I was young. He's shy. So, it was hard for me to become a performer. I had to overcome that. I had to erase that. So anything, you're sick, you're too small, you're too old, whatever it is, those statements that are untrue about the nature of who you are, there may be one there that's underlying your issue, your self-worth as far as your manifestation process. Really, the basis root thought, I'm not good enough, is one of the first things we learn when you're told, be more like your brother, or something like that. You're hearing, I'm not good enough. And that could go back to age 3 or 4 or 5. And, so when you hear that, I'm not good enough, that definitely affects what you draw into your life. So we're going to do a little short, I'm going to sing a song and then take you into a short visualization.